So, welcome to the science and art of open water swimming. Today's guest is Professor Peter Reaburn, one of Australia's leading experts on masters athletes, and someone who's spent a lifetime bridging the gap between sports science and athletic performance. I first met Peter through the Triathlon Science Conference associated with the Noosa Triathlon Festival. In 1999, I presented research there on elite triathletes, and Peter was instrumental in bringing together researchers, coaches, and athletes to share evidence based insights into endurance sport. It was an early example of the role he has played throughout his career in translating sports science into practical knowledge that athletes can apply in training and competition. Professionally, Peter has enjoyed a distinguished academic career, including appointments at Central Queensland Uni and later as Professor and Head of Exercise and Sports Science at Bond University. His research has focused extensively on masters athletes, helping us better understand how training, recovery, performance, and health change as we age. But Peter doesn't just study ageing athletes, he lives it. He's a former national champion surf lifesaver, a masters Ironman triathlon champion, an accomplished open water swimmer, and current president of the Miami Masters Swimming Club. Earlier this year, Peter won 2 golds and a bronze medal in the open water swim at the Australian Masters Swimming Champs, demonstrating that he continues to put his research into practice. In today's conversation, we'll explore what it means to age successfully as an athlete, why open water swimming is attracting increasing numbers of masters participants, and what swimmers can do to maximise both their health and performance as they get older. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Grant. Thanks for the invitation.
Not a problem. It's really good to catch up again. First, congratulations on your recent results at the Masters National Champs. I'd really like to sort of start with, how did swimming first become part of your life?
I remember as a child, I was just very loved. We lived in a coal mining town in Western Australia, Collie, which you may know and may have been to. But we used to play in a little canvas paddle pool with my father in the sand pit during summer. And Mum and Dad used to take us to, it was called Minnunup, which was a swimming hole on the Collie River. And we always, a large family, I've got 3 brothers and a sister, and we're all very active, and that love of the water probably started there. And then we moved to Hong Kong for a year, and then we moved back to the Gold Coast, which is just beautiful place. It's got the ocean. We lived about 1 kilometre away from the Southport Surf Lifesaving Club, and the Olympic pool opened up at Southport in 1965. I'm showing my age. And we were there. We joined the Southport Swimming Club when I was 10 years of age and stayed training with a squad and competing on a Friday night, and then joined Surf Lifesaving in about 1970, and that became my life. The ocean became my life. Then surfing and competing, open water swimming and surf swimming and belt racing.
So you've grown up in this time where some of these sports are really evolving. So how did your involvement sort of continue to evolve? Obviously, as you mentioned, so swimming into surf lifesaving, and even triathlon was, when you first got involved, was still very young.
Well, I can vividly remember hearing. I'd always loved being fit and healthy, and always had a bit of an aptitude for endurance. I always able to swim a long way and not get puffed. I was always able to run without limited training and do it fairly easily. And through my surf lifesaving, I played football in rugby union in winter, and I was always fairly fit. And then in 1980, end of 1981, I heard about a triathlon on the Gold Coast. In fact, it was the very first open to anybody triathlon in Queensland. In fact, it may have even been the first in Australia, held in the canals behind Palm Beach. And having a surf lifesaving background and a love of running, I thought, well, I'll give it a crack. And I ended up winning it on an old Malvern Star bike. Helmets were optional, no such thing as stands. The distance was very ad hoc, and I think I ran in a pair of Nike LDVs, and the guy that got off the bike with me was wearing a pair of Dunlop Volley tennis shoes. So I thought, I think I might have him covered because I was running in some decent shoes. So that sort of got me into triathlon, Grant, out of surf lifesaving and into triathlon. And I had many years engaged with that sport. I just loved the challenge of it, because it was, you could go from Olympic distance to half Ironman to long course to ultimately the Ironman. And I always, when I saw it on television in 1982, as a what was I, 27-year-old, I said I'm going to do Hawaii one day, and I never lost that goal, dream, and achieved it in 2005, and haven't touched Ironman triathlon since.
So looking back, what have these sports meant to you personally?
The health and fitness side of it has been a major driver for me. I suppose I've always seen myself as Peter Reaburn, the athlete. It's part of my identity, and I make no bones about that. I've had a really fulfilling academic career, and that's a part of my life. But even within that academic career, I still see myself as Peter Reaburn, the athlete, who now can be bridging the gap between sport, the athlete side, and the academic, the science of exercise, the science of sport. And I've always loved that blend, and my students value that blend, that I can bridge the gap. But yeah, it's been health and fitness for me, and this desire to remain as an athlete. But I must admit, over the last 5 or 10 years, it's moved more to the health side and looking after myself, keeping my heart strong, my blood lipids low, keeping my blood pressure under control, and more the health and living longer and living a functionally active life into older age. That's my driver.
I was actually just going to ask, has your relationship changed over time? And obviously it has now, but you're still swimming 4 or 5 times a week. What else motivates you to sort of continue, not just training, but you're still doing some competition?
I probably, historically, I've always set a goal, gone for it hard, had a break for a month or two, still what I call ticking over. I'll keep swimming, or I'll keep riding my bike, or I'll keep running, or I'll keep doing Ironman training. But I'd always then, okay, what's next? There'd always be another goal. And I've always been someone that if I set a goal, I tend to go hard at it. And unbeknownst to my competition, because I tend to do a lot of the stuff by myself, but I'm a very focused, when I get focused, I'm a very focused athlete. But as I was saying, sort of over the last 10 years, that desire to set the goal and go hard at it has been tempered by what I've observed with my peers, and also what I'm reading increasingly in the academic journals around the older athletes that have been competitors and hard trainers into their older age are now seemingly struggling with heart issues, atrial fibrillation, stiffening of the heart. And so there are negative consequences, and that is starting to rear its head. And therefore, for me, being aware of that, I need to think more for my longevity and my health, rather than pushing my body like I used to. So I now, to go back to your question, I really only compete now if I'm asked to compete. In masters swimming, it's within relays. But if I'm going to do relays at a swim meet where you can sit at the national titles, it was over 4 days. You can be sitting there for 4 days, doing 1 or 2 relays. No, thank you. I'll set some goals and some individual goals. So for me, it was a 400 meters individual medley, 400 meters freestyle, 800 meters freestyle, and then the open water with a few 50-meter swims just to have a few more events. Still compete, but I only really compete if I'm asked to get involved in a meet for the sake of the club.
So the social side obviously is still a very important component of this.
Increasingly, when I look at my close friendships, I'm now 71, most of my close friendships individually and groups are sport related people. I'm still in touch with the exercise and sports science students that I went through university with. I'm very close to a few masters swimming blokes. In fact, we get together on a Wednesday and we have a swim, and then we have a coffee, and we solve the problems of the world together. And even some of my triathlon mates from the old days, now that I'm back on the Gold Coast, have reconnected with. We get together and have a swim a couple of mornings a week, and we do the same thing. We solve the problems of the world with a cup of coffee afterwards. So that social element is still really big. And the Miami Masters Swimming Club, very large and strong club on the Gold Coast, but we have a very social group network that we connect with regularly.
So I guess as we talk about these masters athletes, for listeners who are unfamiliar with the term, how would you describe a masters athlete?
Well, if I put my academic hat on, yeah, yeah, and I had a number of many PhD students that did a lot of masters athlete related research. One of them in particular did some work on, is the masters athlete a model of successful aging, and published 4 excellent papers in that space. And we defined, when I say we, David Geared, that student, and a number of other students defined masters athletes as over the age of 35 years, competing and training regularly in sports that are designed for older athletes. So they engage with Masters Games, they engage with age group championships, they engage with Masters Swimming.
You spent a lot of time in your career actually studying these masters athletes. What drew you to this area?
Going back to what I was talking about earlier, Peter Reaburn, the athlete, and then Peter Reaburn became the student, and then Peter Reaburn became the professor. But it was always wanting to understand my own physiology and what makes an athlete. As I got older, I've developed a real interest in what makes an elite athlete. And I'm sure it's the psychology with some good genetics. But when I was a younger man in my academic career, it was all around how does the body tick? What makes it tick? I want to really understand what's happening and how can we maximize what's happening for the sake of performance. And I suppose as I got older, I developed an interest in the aging process. And certainly when I started my PhD, I was in my early to mid 30s at that stage after doing physical education for a few years. It was, nothing's been done in the older athlete, the masters athlete space. Let me see if I can do something in that space from a PhD. And that just developed a lifelong interest in it.
And if we talk about successful aging, how has your views on that changed over the course of your career?
Another great question, Grant. Well, if I go back to those early days as a student, it was all around the physical. It was all around, increasing the size of the heart, increasing the pumping capacity of the heart, increasing the number of blood vessels in the working muscles, and maximizing carbohydrate within the muscle and the liver and all the nutritional side of it. It was all fast and slow twitch fibers, to use the old jargon. But as I've sort of gotten older, I've realised, and certainly the area that David Geared did his PhD in and published very excellent papers in well-respected journals, the concept of successful aging started to rear its head for me. And through that, mainly David, with me as his supervisor, learning from him, that successful aging is not just about the physical, it's not just about the heart, it's not the muscles, it's about socially remaining engaged. It's about cognitively keeping the thinking capacity of your brain going, And it's also the psychological health that's important, minimizing anxiety and depression. So it's all about what in successful aging are called the domains. There's the physical, the social, the cognitive, and the psychological. And all the research supports that people that age well are socially connected, they manage anxiety and depression, they keep their brain active, and they stay physically active. So I suppose I've moved to that narrow thinking of physical to being more rounded now, and yeah, how important that is to age well.
So, in that sort of space, then, so a lot of listeners will probably think typically around that same idea about performance and assume that performance declines are inevitable as we age. But how much of aging is actually under our control?
My experience would say all of it, mate. I know there's a genetic component. There's no doubt. I'm blessed. I'm one of my cognitive challenges is researching and writing a family history, which really keeps me engaged mentally, having been a former academic and always loved the research process. But I've looked at my own family history. I've got longevity. Even my 2 times great grandfather, many in the 1800s were living into their 80s. So I'm blessed genetically to have longevity. There's no doubt that's a factor. But again, through the evidence on longevity, those components that we've just mentioned are equally important for living well and living into older age. So for me, quality of life and quantity of life go hand in hand if we can keep those 4 domains going.
So now, if we look about open water swimming and aging, so it seems at the moment that open water swimming is attracting increasing numbers of older participants. Why do you think that is?
It's a great question. And you preempted this with me, and I jumped into the research a little bit. Didn't find too much, I need to say. But if I talk about my own observations, my own experience would say that people that have been involved in swimming for a long time, whether they be former competitors or master swimmers, are looking for different challenges. And open water, rather than going to the pool and competing and sitting at a swim meet all day, no, it's, and I'm an example of that. I've lost interest in going to a swim meet and sitting there doing very little, and then a 50 metre or a 100 metre or a 200 metre swim. I'd much rather go to an event, an open water event, compete, socialise, and then come home. It's over and done with. It's been socially engaging. It's given me a goal. I think that's certainly a factor that's getting older people in, something different. It's also, it's cheaper. Yeah, some might say the entry fees are getting higher, but you can go and do open water swimming training at no cost. I think it's attractive. It's social, to go back to what we're talking about as well. I think open water is a lot more social than swimming, where your head's down and your bum's up. People are taking on new challenges as well. To swim 1,500 metres, to swim 2Ks, 3Ks, 5, 10 or more. I see that as a real challenge. I think wetsuits have added a new dimension, particularly in Perth and even on the Gold Coast here. Wetsuits have added another reason why people can swim all year round, even in the cold. Yeah, and there's increasingly more events being put on to attract people.
So there's a few things I'd really like to sort of cover out of that. But first, do you think there's any advantages from swimming over some land-based endurance sports as we age?
Definitely. Again, Swimming, as anyone who's listened to this and yourself and myself as academics know, that a well-rounded, healthy individual need, particularly as they get older, need to think about their bone mineral density. So, we know that impact. So running, walking is going to allow that. Weight training is everything where you're putting pressure on bones, impact on bones, extra weight on bones, if it's weight training, is going to be of benefit. For me, it's weight training. And when I go walking, I tend to wear very thin shoes and I thump the ground a little bit. And if I'm walking downstairs, I put my whole body weight when I land on the bottom of the stairs. So that gives me that hit. So yeah, weight bearing exercise, running, walking, weight training, really good for that side of things. Swimming, particularly as we get older, non-weight bearing. So very good for joints, for former footballers that have joint issues. And there aren't too many older people I know that haven't got issues in their joints. So swimming is a tremendous advantage there. Personally, it's my go-to place. It's my happy place. I find it a very calming, quiet, thoughtful place. I can become quite meditative, solve problems when I'm swimming. When you've got fitness and you can poke along steady, you can find swimming a very meditative thing to do.
Now, for someone considering a master's swimming, what should they consider before entering open water events?
For me, make sure that they've got some open water skills and experience. I come from a surf lifesaving background, so the ocean and waves doesn't worry me. But if you're doing an open water swim and here on the Gold Coast, we have a lot of surf open water swims, and you need surf skills. So you need to either be coached, and as I said, certainly here on the Gold Coast, and I'm guessing in other centres, there will be open water swimming groups, either paid with a coach or social groups. Most surf clubs will have a social group. Don't necessarily have to be a member of the surf club. Triathlon clubs might have a group that'll get together socially. There's a lot of those groups on the Gold Coast here. And connect with those people, either with a coach and those people or experienced open water surf people. And just, you've got to do it. There's no doubt. Principle number one of training, specificity. If you're going to do a long swim in the ocean, you need to get used to doing long swims in the ocean. Your confidence will grow. If you're swimming with other people, your confidence will grow. If you've got a coach either swimming with you or on a paddleboard with you, instructing you, then your confidence is going to grow. There's no doubt you've got to be prepared for that. In lakes, rivers, less of a concern in terms of that. For me, that ability to go from pool to lake, river, protected environment, flat, a lot easier, but you still need to get used to doing the long, straight swims. You're looking into darkness often. You might see some things at the bottom. You've got to get used to that. So again, get together with like-minded people and do that specific work.
Now, earlier mentioned about wetsuits opening up opportunities for others to get involved in open water. Are there any other health or safety issues that older swimmers should be particularly aware of?
Again, Grant, I'll put my exercise scientist hat on here. Most older people would be aware of their own health. An Exercise and Sports Science Australia, sort of our peak industry body from an academic point of view, and for practitioners now, exercise scientists, accredited exercise physiologists, they have guidelines around having screening. So for me, I still get an annual checkup I'm 71, I'm fit, I don't have any health issues whatsoever. I still get my doctor to just check me over, check my blood pressure. I get a resting ECG, and every 2 years I'll do a maximal stress test under the supervision of a cardiologist. So in answer to your question, if people know that they've got health issues, they should at least go and have a chat with their doctor, their family doctor. And to be honest with you, ideally a sports physician, a doctor that might have a reputation for dealing with athletes, a doctor that within the swimming circles is known to work with swimmers. And just talk openly and candidly about your own health. Ask them to screen, maybe do some blood tests to give you the tick to say, yep, away you go.
And is there any other concerns, such as the ability to tolerate cold or manage heat, that older athletes might need to consider?
It's interesting, this idea of cold acclimatization, very little research, as you would know, in that space. But certainly what research has been done, and anecdotally, I'm going to say that you need to be prepared for the cold. And certainly in terms of heat, you need to be prepared, even as a swimmer, for fluid loss. And we actually published a paper on fluid loss in Journal of Swimming Research of 1988 or something. And I was a guinea pig. I remember doing it with a couple of my undergraduate students in those days, one of whom I'm still in touch with. And we found significant fluid loss in a heated indoor pool and no fluids doing a standard 4K swim session, which, you know, a classic sort of 3.5, 4K swim session as an endurance swim session, significant fluid loss. So yeah, make sure you hydrate before, you hydrate during, and you hydrate after training if it's a long session, and the same goes for when you're going to do a competition.
Now, if we look at masters athletes with their swimming and activity, and we look at things like training, recovery, and strength, which you've mentioned already, if we first talk about training, how should training change as we get older?
I have absolutely no doubt that speed drops with age. If I compare my own endurance ability, it's definitely dropping. My times for 400s, 800s, 1500s, 3Ks, it's dropping. But my speed, my ability to do a 50 meter or 100 meter is dropping at a much greater rate. So for me, particularly when I was preparing for the recent nationals in May up in Brisbane, I made sure I was getting focused on more speed work. And to put those two things together for the listeners, I've mainly done endurance training all my life for, you know, half Ironmans, long bike rides. I've done some ultra distance bike rides, a lot of ultra distance running historically as well. But it's, my endurance is there. I have a very good training age. I've been at endurance for a long time. How can I get faster for shorter distances? By doing speed. So for me, I now include at least once a week some sprints in the pool. I do 25s and I do 50s with long rests, so that I'm fresh. I've got no interest in becoming lactated. So if I was training for something, I might, a 200 or a 400 swim, I might, but I had no interest. So for me, speed becomes more important, a training mode for the older athlete, if they've got a big training age of endurance. And critically, Grant, I'm a big believer in threshold work. So what I call hurt but hold pace. So I can do a series of 20/50s, or I can do a series of 15/100s. I can still hold a 140 time base. I can still do my 50s on a 50, 55 second cycle. But I know the first one I do is going to be the same speed as the last one I'm going to do. Those threshold sessions, fairly long, at a hurt but whole pace, knowing I can complete the last one as good as the first. I do at least one of those a week normally. And when I'm in heavy training, I'll do it twice a week.
So that's really interesting. Because as athletes age, it appears that, like most people, we tend to go towards what we enjoy and try and avoid those things that create discomfort. So do you think that is potentially one of the things that these masters athletes get wrong, is that they, in terms of if they want to still perform, they're not necessarily getting the diversity of training?
Absolutely. The other thing that they're not getting that diversity of training, but I've also seen, and I still see it in our Masters Swimming Club, I see way too many swimmers that have been doing the same thing year in, year out. It's worked for them in the past and they're going to stick with it. They won't do something different, a new stimulus. And in fact, it was about 1998 or 9, I was asked to present the physiology component at the Australian Swim Coaches Association conference. It was when Susie O'Neill was at her peak. And then I was asked to sit on a panel with some elite coaches as, the physiologist on a round table type discussion. And a question was asked that Susie O'Neill is doing something different now. She's doing something different leading into these Olympics. And she was, but she was doing what was called HVO2 sessions. She was doing sprint 25s with short rest and a number of those with then a long rest. So VO2 max type work, preparing for the 200 meters butterfly. And why would she be doing that? And my response was, this is new stimulus for her, a new stimulus. So again, the need for even elite, if they're getting the same result all the time, they might still remain there, but as people start pushing them again, they need to think about doing something different. And the older athlete, what's different is speed and also weight training, which we haven't touched on yet. The older someone becomes, the more important weight training becomes for the older competitive athlete.
So let's talk about strength training now then. So you've mentioned it, but you've also highlighted the importance of strength training through the work you've done. Why is it so important?
Probably two reasons. One is related to the health benefits. And as you'd be aware, increasingly weight training, whether it be light to moderate weights with a number of repetitions or heavy weights with a small number of repetitions, has been shown to be benefiting overall health. So, and in particular, heavy weights, bone mineral density for the older male and female. But the other major decline that occurs in aging, and it starts around 35 to drop linearly by not much at around 50 years of age, I'm just using rough numbers here, starts to decline more rapidly up until the early 60s through to early 70s. And then there's a rapid decline, and it's in strength and muscle mass. So muscle mass in particular for the older athletes, 60 plus, is starting to drop. Muscle mass drops, and muscle mass is related to strength. So strength is declining. So the importance of trying to hold on to muscle mass and or develop muscle mass through hypertrophy or muscle enlargening, weight training becomes important for the older competitive athlete. And again, as you and I both know, with an interest in this space, a gentleman, Ronestad, Ronestad, has done a lot of research in elite endurance athletes to show that elite endurance athletes, young, that take on weight training in a periodized fashion, that is during their, in brackets, off season, develop their strength, and then drop that down and start doing more endurance specific work, cycling, swimming, running, rowing, cross-country skiing, their performance improves. So even the young elite are now doing weight training, and it's been shown to benefit their endurance performance.
So is it a non-negotiable when we start to talk about these older masters athletes? And if so, how much time should they allocate to developing strength?
It's a great question again, Grant. I love these insightful questions, mate. I do. And we're on the same wavelength here. There's me when I'm going hard at a goal, I'm going to prioritize doing my weight training twice a week minimum. And again, I'll periodize it so that before I start doing my intense sprint work, more threshold work, as I build towards my goal, I'm going to be doing more emphasis load-wise on my weight training. As I start doing more speed work, more threshold work, so as an older athlete, I can't do too many big sessions. I need to recover. I don't want to burn myself out. I will drop that weight training down to once a week. And then when I'm doing my speed work, as I build, for me, it's a month out, 6 weeks out, leading into a major meet, a swim meet in this case, I might only go once every 2 weeks to the gym. But again, that's me with my competitor hat on. Peter Reaburn, the Masters athlete, but health focused, not performance focused Masters athlete, I might go, I don't need that at all. I'm not interested in doing it. The academic in me would say you should be doing it for the health benefits as much as the performance benefits.
So within that, you mentioned recovery between sessions, obviously the intensity of some of that strength work. How does the ability to recover from training change with age?
I've had some excellent PhD students look into this space. Tom Doring, Natai Borges, Borges, and Luke Del Vecchio. But we looked in depth at recovery in older athletes. And we found that depending on the fitness of the older athletes, specifically their VO2 max, that they could recover physiologically and performance-wise from any bout quite well compared to younger athletes. But how did they perceive their recovery? They perceived they weren't as recovered for the next hard session. But when you look at their performance measures that we were doing, they were still able to perform equally with the same amount of recovery as the younger athletes that we looked at. But they perceived that they weren't as recovered. So the bottom line for me there is that if perception is a factor, if they think they haven't recovered, then swim easy or ride easy or run easy. For me, I only do a couple of hard sessions a week. And the other days when I swim 4 or 5 times a week. Those other sessions are long, loping swims, well below threshold. And that enables me to then bounce back for a quality session. I also focus very strongly on my sleep. I have a very rigid sleep routine. I practice what I preach in terms of nutrition. I eat protein regularly during the day. I have a very strong focus on high glycemic index carbohydrates immediately afterwards and protein immediately afterwards. And when I'm in hard training, I'll even use compression garments as well, and hot and cold if I'm going real hard at something.
Still just touching on that recovery component and obviously the perception of how do I feel? What are some of the other signs that athletes are not recovering adequately?
Again, I call upon my own experience here, and as both a coach, because I still coach master swimming, and as an athlete. A coach would, by watching somebody or asking someone, know when they walk into the pool, if we're talking open water swimming, or seeing them down at the beach, or wherever you're going to be doing your a lake, whatever, wherever you're doing your open water stuff, that they're tired, that they've had a big day at work, or they've got stress in their personal life. For me, those overarching overall stresses in life are equally as important in terms of how an athlete is going to perform in the pool or in open water. And again, put the coach on, looking at someone when they dive into the water. Do they look differently? Are they more puffed at the end of their warm up than you would expect them to be? If their form technically is poor, the coach is going to think they're not good. But as an athlete, I know as soon as I take my first couple of strokes, whether it's going to be a good session or a bad session. And I tend to go with my body. I've always been a good body listener. If I feel I haven't recovered, I'm going to make sure I go easy for today's session, because I want to make sure that I'm getting some adaptations still from the session I've done yesterday or the day before.
What do you think the biggest myth is about aging and athletic performance?
That as we get older, we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. And if it's an older athlete wanting to perform, another myth is that we shouldn't be training hard. There is no doubt research on young athletes and older athletes has shown that intensity is the key for improved performance. So for that competitive older athlete, that competitive masters athlete, ensure that you have some intensity in your training, whether that be threshold work, whether that be VO2 max work, or whether that be sprint work, and ideally a combination of the lot leading into the goal.
So, now taking together all those things we've spoken about, if you're coaching a typical 60-year-old open water swimmer, what are the three most important components of their training?
I love threes, Grant. I love threes. So definitely the principal specificity. So if that 60-year-old open water swimmer is going to do a surf related event, the Cole Classic, Rottnest Channel Swim, for you guys over in WA, the Pier to Pub, if you're a Victorian. Here on the Gold Coast, we have the Cooley Classic. We have the Noosa Swim Series up at Noosa on the Sunshine Coast. But it's number one, prepare specifically. So get into those environments that are exactly the same as the environments you're going to swimming, do the event in. That's number one. Secondly, if you're going to race, you have to do threshold work. You have to do threshold training, that hurt but hold training. That for me is the bread and butter of any competitive masters or junior swimmer. Get used to that hurt and get used to that hold, because that's what it's going to be like in the event. And the third one, well, I would say make sure that you are technically proficient. So a coach, I see a lot of people coming into swimming that aren't technically capable, still think they're 30 and trying to train with poor technique and end up getting injured because of that poor technique. So either ask the coach or work with a coach that has a focus on technique, and or ask a coach and pay them to focus on you individually outside of the normal swim session. That would be my big three, Grant.
All right, a couple of quick ones to finish off. What's your favourite swim set and why?
My go-to is 2050s on 50. I do that at least once a week. As I've gotten older, I now have a pull buoy between my legs and I wear paddles. That's my go-to, 2050s on 50, occasionally on 55 if I'm not feeling 100%.
When you're swimming, are you a singer, a counter, or a thinker?
If I'm swimming hard, if I'm doing a threshold set, I'm a counter. If I'm swimming easy, I'm a thinker. And if I've listened to a great song, leading into that, I'll have that song in my head. I've become a War on Drugs fan. If any of the listeners, I love a band called War on Drugs, and I often have them going through my head when I'm swimming, if I'm swimming easy.
And where is your favourite place to swim?
I swim in the Gold Coast Aquatic Centre diving pool. It's 5 metres deep. It's 33 1/3 metres long, so 3 laps per 100. It's never crowded. They put lanes in, and myself and a mate and sometimes another mate, we swim side by side there. And it's my happy place. It's nice and warm. It's quiet. Yeah, it's lovely.
And just final question, is there anything we haven't covered today that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I probably, Grant, for me, why am I swimming? I find it a really therapeutic exercise. I just love diving into the water and having always been a swimmer, always been fit enough to swim long. I just love nothing better than just loping and thinking about my technique and just swimming easily and comfortably without being puffed. There's something about the water. For me, it's my happy place.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to reconnect and to chat all things around swimming and the Masters athletes. I've really appreciated it.
It's been a pleasure, Grant, and thank you for the insightful questions and the wisdom of the years coming through.
I think one of the big take-home messages from today's conversation is that successful aging isn't simply about maintaining performance. It's about staying physically active, continually challenging yourself, building social connections, looking after your health, and finding enjoyment in the journey. Peter's experience as both a scientist and a lifelong athlete reminds us that while aging brings change, it doesn't mean we stop striving, learning, competing, or enjoying the water. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast platform, and share this episode with a training partner, coach, or fellow swimmers. It really helps others discover the show. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the water.